Hi everyone, Dennis Foley from Acoustic Fields. Today we're going to talk about what I call the 8-foot acoustic nightmare. Unfortunately, in North America, our ceiling heights are mostly in the 8-foot range. And that couldn't be worse for us in terms of acoustics. Now, like if it's a drop ceiling height and there's another foot or two behind that space, that's good. But most of the time in North America, at least, we have that 8-foot, ceiling height that we have to work with. So when we do acoustic analysis, when I look at all these room forms, I try to get at least two of the three, the height, width, and the length, favorable. So at least two of the dimensions favorable. And about 90% of the time, the 8-foot ceiling height is always our nemesis. We can get decent width most of the time, we can get decent length, but that 8-foot ceiling height, and it runs the whole length and width of the room, see? So any pressure that doesn't fit in that 8-foot distance is a problem throughout the room. What's favorable? 14 foot for width and a length and a height. Now, we would never get that in North America. I do a lot of work in Europe, and we do most of the time in Europe have larger distances to work with when it comes to ceiling height, but when we build new rooms, 14 foot is our minimum ceiling height, and there's all kinds of reasons for that, and let's talk about one of them. So we want to get a favorable balance between the size of the room, the volume of the room, and the treatment depending on usage. So let's use full wavelengths for our example so we can just get a feel for it. I know there's half wavelength and there's quarter wavelength rules out there, but I'm not a big fan of using those to illustrate this particular point. So let's use full wavelengths and let's look at some frequencies and some dimensions. At 8 foot, we have 141 cycles. So everything below 141 is going to be a problem. At 9 foot, look at the change. 141 to 125. At 10 foot, down to 113. At 11 foot, down to 102. 12 foot, 94. 13 foot, 87. And 14 foot, we're down to the 80 cycle range. Now, what does this mean? Well, it just means that everything below these numbers must be treated, okay? And our range is 141 to 80 cycles, so there's a large treatment difference between a 141 cycle problem and an 80 cycle problem. So the more distance we can give ourselves, the less material we're going to use, the less amount of that material we're going to use, and the less space we're going to take up in the room. So the higher the ceiling, the better. So another issue with the lower ceilings is then we get into middle and high frequency reflections, which we'll deal with in another video. So you always want distance in your room to manage all the issues, whether they're pressure issues, like we have with the 8-foot, or they're reflection issues with everything above 141 cycles or below it for that matter. Thank you. Thank you for watching our videos. We really appreciate your support, and if you could give us a thumbs up for our Facebook page, that would really be helpful to us. Our room form gives us all the information about your room, length, width, height, usage, and we need you to fill that out before you send it in. Those of you that just found us on the internet and are under a time crunch, you can go to the contact section of our website, and there's a book now button so you can book an appointment with us, but make sure I have your room form to go on with it. The ebook series that we have is free. Please subscribe to that. There's exclusive videos in there so you can get an idea of your particular situation, possibly with the videos. And then our forum. We have a forum on our website. There's a lot of forums out there on the internet. Our forum I'll actually answer your questions and comments, so you'll be dealing directly with me through our forum. So once again, thank you for your support.